What's in the hole? There is a chimera in the hole. Max! Can you not tell? In Clash 2, we have a chimera, which is the mythical beast that has two heads, lion and goat's head with snake's tail. But I think you always have to push yourself to make things more real, whether it's watching lion footage and seeing how a lion moves and making sure the chimera moves like a lion. What I like the most is taking something that's fantastical and then looking in the world for real touchstones to apply to that. And I think that, to me, is the most enjoyable part of the process.
You're taking reference from all different creatures. You know, we're referencing lions, tigers, big cats, and also bats as well. I mean, the creature's got bat wings.
What was asked for was something that didn't feel too clean and not too majestic straight away. I wanted to be dirty, a bit grungy, feel more evil rather than looking like it just, you know, come out of the CG monster factory.
It was a very dusty location, so we always had loads of dust being kicked up, and all of those things to sort of help tie the digital creature into the real environment.
Nick, you know, was quite keen on doing as much of the destruction as possible, as breakaways and explosions and stuff. A lot of the time, it's better to do that practically because you get interaction with the actors as well. You know, if you blow a building up, you get pieces of lightweight material that comes over and hits them, and you know, it's very difficult to do that convincingly CG. You know, it really is a good combination.
Well, it is nice to get as many practical effects and interaction on the set as you possibly can do. We had buildings and walls that would collapse and explode, and you know, and we did want as many of those as we could do. So it was a nice mix between, you know, using practical effects and visual effects, and you know, and we planned all of those out with Neil and his team of guys.
Our biggest single effect in the village is basically the chimera burrowing under the ground and exploding out of the ground, and that's really the first time we see the chimera. And for this, we're using a methodology which is called a trench blast. It's basically a series of explosions every foot for about 120 feet. It basically causes this wave, like a burrowing effect, under the ground.
So this is a test that we did to show Jonathan. We'll probably be working day and night to rig this up in Tenerife.
There's 360 of these in a line, dotted down there. So we've got electronic debts on these.
Under no circumstances should anyone run in the trench on this shot.
We certainly have it to one time because I think it's a 2-day reset to relay all the explosives in the trench and then relay all the sand back over the top again.
So what we're going to have you do is run through the streets, a couple of you crossing, a couple of you running from it and stuff like that. I want to make sure that you're all really comfortable with what you do, because this is such a big, wide shot, and we've got one take only, so we don't want to f*** it up.
Neil, come in, Neil. Okay. Hot. Neil's hot. Neil's hot.
Neil's coming. Here we go.
Special effects, well done. Stunts, well done.
Yeah,
good
really
job.
good.
Well
Everyone, really great.
The nicest surprise when we read the first draft of Clash of Titans 2 was the character of Agenor. There was a sense of lightness and humor about that character that didn't exist in the first movie.
Have you ever had a woman love you so much, she locks you up like a pet rabbit?
Toby's a perfect actor to work with.
I think it's my extraordinary eyes.
He can improvise well, he believes it's all about the story and not himself. He's generous, and he throws himself into it.
Your role as a supporting actor in any position is to reflect light onto your lead and to bring levity when he's down, you know. So actually, most of the time I'm cracking jokes with Sam.
The problem is Toby and Sam are good friends, so I keep having to remind them that they have to hate each other.
Muttonhead. I told you not to slap me. I know, I'm sorry. Just don't do it again. I'll wait. I'm sorry.
I think we'd make quite a good trio, because Toby is very good at taking the piss out of everyone, especially me. He's like a stand-up comedian, Toby, when he's off set.
For the McDonald's action figure, they'll have loads of them left. It'll just be one Perseus and millions of Agenor. Can we get the tramp one, please, Mum? Who's going to ask for the homeless one? Can we get the homeless one, Mum, with the big one?
He does sometimes slip into the odd kind of reggae chant, you know, because I think the dreads sort of get the better of him sometimes.
I'd say this hair's rather comfortable.
When Toby first saw the man truck, I think he was a bit apprehensive with it. You know, sort of said, "Do you want me to get in that? Are you sure?"
We'll hit the wire off your back foot. So stroll in, I'll walk you through it. Go in at the speed you think you're going to go. Wire, you ignore it. Now, I want you to go in there for a whack it.
Fucking bollocks.
So it took a bit of reassurance with us to say, no, it's perfectly safe. You just step here, and when you step here, it's going to go up.
He was an average actor, but it was an amazing way to die. Piece of plastic wood through his neck. Brilliant. Give that to my mum, wouldn't you? A smile.
Yeah, Jim. Any last requests?
It's one of those moments where when the crew stand around and look nervous, it's like, you know when you're on a flight and there's turbulence? You know not to worry if they're still serving. You know, they're still walking up and down the aisle, but when they sit down, and these lot look worried.
Here we go, team. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, Zeus! I told you to stand still.
And after the first couple of times, he was great, you know, he went with it.
Oh, wait, I could climb out of this huge hole. Yeah, they were laughing at me. Being laughed at's more scary, isn't it, really? Do you know what seems great? Loads of women. Truth be told, you know, they're actually just doing that. Can I just pat your head? It's great.
When we were in the woods shooting the Cyclops, we didn't know what we were contending with. And, you know, it's that one of those sort of classic things where you know there's something scary in the woods, and you don't know what's going to come out. And suddenly, you know, you're looking, and suddenly, whoa, you're having to look right up there because the thing is 30 foot high. So, you know, in order for us all to have an eye line, we had to have some dude running along with a huge pole and a tennis ball on it, you know, literally through the woods with this sort of, you know, extended pole.
That's the Cyclops eye line. That's his head height, 30 foot.
You're just like a 5-year-old kid. You got to believe in the world.
Hey!
As long as, you know, I believe that the monster's out to get me, then it doesn't matter. We know it's CG. Cyclopses don't exist. But if I dive into the situation 100%, then an audience will follow me, hopefully.
3, 2, 1, heck!
It's difficult for the actors, there's no doubt about it. Having to imagine what is going on, we can show them previs, we can have a tennis ball on a stick that's at the right height, but if there's nothing there, it's very, very hard. So there was a couple of mechanisms that we used on set to provide interaction with Sam.
I still think a tiny bit faster.
Go on then. Have you got any more speed, Daryl?
You got a bit more.
Go on then. 3, 2, 1, go!
Now look good.
Let's get stupider and stupid.
All right, so there we go, boys. Ready?
Really hates you, Dan.
Come on, Hen. Come on, Hen.
50-51 Apple Jackson, 1, eh, camera mark?
Action! Good acting, Sam. You made that look hard, Sam.
We're dealing with a character who will be fully CG, but we're really reliant on the performances from our principal actors to really sell this stuff before we get in there.
We did a lot of motion capture for our Cyclops. It was the absolutely accurate movement and scale that we wanted.
What you get from motion capture is a recognizable performance, not only physically, but emotionally as well, just from the body language. We've got a human performance, essentially. What we did differently on this film was we had to retrofit the motion capture into the plates. So on our motion capture stage, we had scanned the set. We knew precisely where all the trees needed to be in relation to the camera for every shot.
We actually see some kind of sticks there. They're supposed to be trees. So we actually built the platform there exactly like the live-action environment.
And then Martin Bayfield was instructed to run through this digital set and do the performances in time to the camera that had been shot a month earlier.
As far as creatures go, big Cyclopses are my favorite. I love very kinetic, suspenseful action, and I think having massive creatures within that is spectacular.
Brother Hades, we've come to your domain. As agreed, show yourself to us.
Our main concept for the underworld was almost to have a world within a world. And so in the underworld, you can see the underside of Earth. You can see underneath the oceans, you can see what the bottom of mountains look like. The world is almost like an atom, and there's this little nucleus, and that's Tartarus, and the rest of the space around the nucleus is the underworld.
The way the production designers created that underworld, it's really amazing. I mean, just the stage in London where the underworld was built, without the visual effects, I'm talking just the physical set, it's unbelievable.
The sense of scale is immense, so imagine you're going into vast caverns down in the center of the earth with sort of gantries of granite stretching across chasm-like spaces. So we're tiny figures walking along enormous Everest-like rock faces down at the center of the earth.
The entire of Tartarus is a massive set extension where Kronos is entombed in stone at one end, and then Zeus is chained up, and then his sort of life force is sucked out of him, and that life force is representative as this sort of like lava-type substance that is basically sucked out of Zeus and given to Kronos.
You fool! Liam had a bloody hard job, actually. Liam had to do a scene where he was being dragged in chains. We had him attached to a wire, which basically meant that Ares could drag him along. He then gets attached to these chains, which was so heavy, and they were so long, we had to attach them to him. He has a harness on. I didn't envy him that at all.
Why don't you weep?
If I have to weep, it will be for you, Ares.
I'm in chains for quite a bit, locked to this rock formation. And you're obviously deprived of physical movement, so you have to rely a lot on the cameraman hopefully coming in for your close-up. But they all looked after me. You know, when there was a break, I was released. So I was taken care of.
The Zeus prosthetics actually got quite complicated and became more a piece of set, really.
As you can have a look here, he's been imprisoned by rock, which in turn turns to molten volcanic lava. What we have here is the second stage, which is an early part of the volcanic activity. So at the moment, we're putting the lights on behind the fiberglass. This whole process so far has taken round about 8 weeks, which we start off with a body cast of Liam Neeson, which it's removed at the moment. At the moment, you can just work out his legs, which are here. And then they've turned into lava, and his body will be standing up here, which is this area.
And then, of course, behind where Zeus is chained up, we've got Kronos appearing, being unlocked from the rock. Now that was just a sort of 200-foot by 150-foot green screen. You know, this guy is huge, and we were having to react to him, not really knowing what he might look like. So, you know, you pick the kind of scariest dude you've ever thought of and magnify him by, 250 times and kind of give a look of awe.
We wanted one practical monster in this movie, and we felt like the Minotaur was the perfect candidate.
We created the prosthetics and prosthetic effects for the Minotaur. His clothes are rotted, he's filthy and dirty and disgusting. It's kind of a human nightmare, really.
The creatures are fantastical, and how do we ground them? In other words, take things back to their base level, not necessarily to what people and artists have interpreted them to be. In other words, the Minotaur, maybe it wasn't a man with a bull's head, but a man who was deformed and resembled a bull. I think the important thing is just to have, in a way, pity for this thing. Like, he's a real person who just got stuck forever.
We kind of stayed closer to human, but make him look more animalistic. And the body is more just a deformed body where the bones are not, shaped correctly.
The Minotaur is fully covered. I don't think there's one part of his skin, apart from his tongue maybe, that is all that's left of him that you see. He has feet, legs, body, head, horns, hands.
Pretty gnarly.
Teeth and contact lenses, so that he's completely covered.
Ah, this is the life, eh?
This Minotaur suit is sculpted on top of a life cast of Spencer Wilding, who's a fantastic creature suit performer. He's about 2 meters tall and very dynamic.
Spencer Wilding is a stunt actor. He did Wolfman. He's been doing this kind of thing for a long time, and he is very good at it.
Hours. It felt like 5 minutes, really. It's rock and roll, eh?
As soon as he puts the suit on, it makes a huge difference. He really brings it to life and does a fantastic performance. The more experience you have wearing prosthetics and understanding how they limit your performance as an actor, you can overcome their limitations and get a better performance out of them.
When I go into Minotaur mode, it's like, you know, it's a Minotaur, isn't it? It's like you don't see one every day. Get exhausted.
You know, it's interesting. Seeing the Minotaur sequence is terrifying.
Who are you?
If there's a little bit of a horror movie element in this movie, that is the labyrinth and that is the Minotaur.
Ah, it's bad. Don't feel so horny now.
Our job is to hold Kronos back for as long as possible.
Baker 74, Baker take 2A camera mark.
The final battle scene, I think, will be the biggest sequence I've ever directed.
Jonathan, we're standing by.
Yeah, you keep going and you'll see there's all these trenches. Go to the front trench. What we're hoping for is something that's very raw, but very huge scope-wise.
Baker 74, Charlie, take 1A camera mark.
And I think we have all the ingredients. You have a massive titan, you have Mackay creatures, and you have soldiers who know that they're probably going to die as they defend humanity during its last stand.
Oh, so we're imminently going to be
So just show me a sort of bit of a staggered sort of defence thing that you could do here.
We're in the Trevor Quarry, which is an old limestone quarry, which is on the edge of the Brecon Beacons National Park in the middle of Wales. It's a huge, empty quarry. It's a long way from civilization, so we're able to do all the things which we need to do to create this fantastic battle sequence.
It was a fantastic set, brilliantly designed. It was a sort of tented encampment with wooden stakes pointing out towards defensive fortifications. Wonderful detail in the design of shields and spears and textures. And then the cliffs of the quarry either side, so they look dramatic against the sky, sort of precipitous cliff faces.
We've got up to about 700 people on site today, including cast, crew and extras.
Regroup the other side of the car.
We've tried to colour code the factions slightly to distinguish them from each other. So we've got blue for the Trojans, we've got red and orange for the Argos, and then we have white for the Athenians. We have about 500 spears, about 400 shields, about 100 archers, about 500 or 600 rubber weapons of various types for the different armies.
Grab your shields. They're rubber swords, and they've got a metal insert in the middle to keep them stiff.
This is where we dress all the extras for the Argos, Spartan, Trojan and Athenian armies. So the guys come in here, they go to their section. This is the Argos section, this is their armour, one with a tunic underneath. They then get their helmets then past me to give a final check.
Here we go.
D-marker!
It's around 50 stuntmen. Plus we've got horsemen as well. Well, we've actually worked very hard with the locals and the extras. We've had boot camps to teach them how to fire bow and arrows, how to form up into battalions and how to move, and they've done really well, so that's really helped us like boost the look of the film.
And then we also have Dante's burning diesel to give us sort of clouds of black smoke, and we have the Beslers pumping out white smoke to sort of mix in with that, and it just gives it a very big atmospheric look. So it helps just sort of give the whole sort of atmospherics of the battle a much more sort of gritty, realistic feel.
That one there, Steve.
Oh, the special effects have been absolutely, they've been smiling all week because they've been dying to do these massive explosions. Neil Corbold and his team are amazing.
We've got quite a few big lava explosions where these flaming balls of lava come into the battlefield and explode. So we've rigged 60 big explosions with dynamite and petrol and dust and peat and stuff like that. And it's supposed to be Kronos throwing these lava balls at the armies.
We're going, here we go.
They're ridiculously big. You actually feel the ground shake when they go off. They're incredible.
Stand by! 3, 2, 1!
Fire the artillery!
Cut! Cut! Nice. Reset.
Great Kronos, Father, we have delivered Zeus, your son.
When we were researching Greek myth, it's all these father-son relationships, Perseus and his own son Helios, and then further along, Kronos and Zeus.
Kronos, my dad. At it again.
You know, in a lot of ways, the ancient Greek myths are like a huge soap opera, a multi-generational soap opera.
We're told by a very famous poem called the Theogony, which is a story of the birth of the gods, that the very first being to come out of chaos, right, out of this kind of primordial nothingness, was Gaia, so the Earth Mother, and she is the very first god. And she gives birth, all of her own, to the heavens, or the Uranos, right? So the Earth gives birth to the heavens,
and the two of them couple, and they bear the Titans, including Kronos. So everything's going great until Uranos feels threatened by the Titans and wants to get rid of them in order to protect himself. And knowing this, Kronos in particular organizes brothers to turn on their father.
At this point, Kronos takes over, he becomes the ruler.
So later, Kronos is told in a prophecy that one of his descendants, one of his children, would displace him as a king of the gods. So he decides he won't take any chances, and he tells Rhea, his wife, I want to eat all of my children. And so one by one, she hands them to him until it comes to Zeus, the youngest of all of them, and she just can't do it. So she takes a stone the size of little baby Zeus, wraps it up in a blanket, gives it to her husband, who then swallows it.
So of course, Kronos, being the dumb brute that he is, right, just thinks, oh yeah, it just swallows down a rock, no big deal.
And then Zeus is spirited away by an eagle, who will later become a symbol of his, into safety, and grows up, and then later comes back, gives his father a potion, makes him cough up all of his siblings who are still alive, and then they band together to bring down Kronos in much the same way that Kronos had brought down his father.
So the Titanomachy was the epic final battle that establishes Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades as the final rulers in the cosmos.
So Kronos was imprisoned in a place called Tartarus, which is way, way in the underworld, where he could do no harm. Zeus decided he would take the heavens, and Poseidon would get the seas, and Hades would get the short straw. He'd get the underworld.
I don't know, I don't quite get it, because I think the underworld could be cool.
Mythologically speaking, there's this sort of legacy and epic quality that has continued over and over again.
We have the power between us to put on a little display.
So shall we finish this?
We're looking for Hephaestus, the maker of such mighty weapons.
What I like about Greek myth and that genre of storytelling is the extremity of it. If you take a simple fact, like my character, Hephaestus, was born lame and therefore rejected by his parents, who threw him from Mount Olympus.
What Zeus does in his anger is like basically pick him up and toss him off of Mount Olympus, right? And the story is that he fell for like 9 days straight.
Not for like 3 hours, not 5 hours. He said a whole week of falling before he hit some island in the middle of nowhere. It's a mad story.
You forged these weapons right here for the gods.
He was the engineer of the gods. He was the one who built the weapons for the gods.
He can make great beauty out of base metal. He can also turn gold into magical weapons and armaments. He once made a belt, unwisely, for his wife, Aphrodite, which would make her attractive to everyone. Not that she was having much trouble in that area anyway.
Aphrodite has been forced to marry Hephaestus by her dad, Zeus, which Hephaestus is obviously thrilled about, but all the rest of the gods are sort of snickering about it amongst themselves. Of course, Aphrodite is not going to take this lying down, and so she cultivates an affair with Ares, the god of war. And Hephaestus finds out about this and decides to catch them in the act. So he constructs a special net that no one could get out of.
And he threw a steel net over her in order for other people to see them, to witness their betrayal. But they all kind of laughed at him instead of them.
Poor Hephaestus, he just can't catch a break, you know? He's also the source of a lot of humor. He's the scapegoat. He's the guy who all the gods get to laugh at because of his funny limp and his ugly features.
Ultimately, he's exiled forever, and that seemed like a really interesting character. This guy that used to be a god, the guy that used to have all this power, is now exiled.
Well, in that case, we'd best prepare.
For what?
The end of the bloody world.
Minotaur is the last gatekeeper at the end of the labyrinth and is a warrior that's been there for thousands of years, waiting for anyone who tries to get through.
The Minotaur. That's one of the maybe the most scandalous stories in mythology, the story of Minos and his bull and his wife Pasiphae. He didn't sacrifice the bull that he was supposed to, and as a result of that, his wife was made to fall in love with that bull.
So there's this horrifying and slightly comic story of Pasiphae mounting a bull, right? And then having a child as a result of this union, which is a combination of the two, right? So the bottom half of its body is somehow human, but the top half is the bull. This type of offspring, by necessity, is going to be monstrous.
So he has to deal with this, the consequences of his actions, that is this monster that is now, you know, running around on the island of Crete. And so he has Daedalus, the master craftsman of the ancient world and of ancient mythology, build the labyrinth to contain the monster.
So you have the Minotaur who eats humans, who desires to eat people, who lives on human flesh, and who lives in this labyrinth. People are thrown into it, and they can't find their way out, and eventually the Minotaur hunts them down and eats them. We have the story of the decision by King Minos to require Athenian youth to be fed to the Minotaur every year.
And this was this gruesome punishment because you got lost in this maze, right? It's dark, you can never find your way around, and then you just get eaten by this disgusting, this scary beast.
So one of the young men that comes one year is a hero named Theseus. And he's helped in this by the daughter of King Minos, Ariadne. As he's about to be thrown into the labyrinth, she gives him a ball of twine and a sword. And with that, he can find his way back out of the labyrinth.
So he finds his way in, slays the Minotaur, gets out, and then hightails it out of there. But Theseus, like Perseus, is one of these characters, right? Like tasked with one of these impossible adventures. This is a beast that had done so much destruction, right? And had been a nightmare for so many human beings for so long that it really was amazing that Theseus got through it.
The walls of Tartarus are falling.
It is emptying all its demons onto the earth. The first are already here.
The monsters are one of the most memorable parts of mythology, and they show a lot of creativity and imagination on the part of the authors who were creating these things.
We did an exhaustive search of mythology in order to figure out kind of what's the most exciting things that we could see and what, as fans of the material, do we want to see. And so the Chimera, in particular, was one of the first ones that we grabbed onto because it's just such a cool character.
The creature was a much more primitive being.
You look at pictures of this thing and you think, wow, whoever thought of that? So the Chimera has the head of a lion, breathes fire, has a tail like a serpent, and then has a goat head on the middle of its spine, on its back, kind of facing the opposite direction, facing backwards.
The configurations are always slightly different depending on the story, and that the impossibility of the combination is meant to point out the incomprehensibility of these monsters, right? That for human beings, for us, these things are way beyond our comprehension. The only way that we can conceive of them is to imagine them as a combination of things that we're familiar with. Snakes, okay? We're familiar with lions, okay? We're familiar with goats.
So in the original myth, the Chimera actually is attacked by Bellerophon, another hero, who rides Pegasus. But it would certainly not be surprising to see Perseus fulfilling that role.
We have Makai, which are these soldiers from the underworld, which are insanely weird and violent and terrifying.
And the Makai, again, are something that there isn't an enormous amount to draw from mythology. They're kind of just labeled as these spirits of battle. And so we thought that they could be great shock troops for Kronos and for sort of the Titan army.
It's a very minor sort of spirit demon, and we couldn't ever find ourselves anything other than the name to it. And so that gave us sort of carte blanche to sort of make it what we wanted. Because other than this name, there's not a lot known about it.
The Makai and other minor gods, in some ways, were just personifications of things like anger and hatred and confusion and battle lust and just the desire to destroy and take vengeance.
And, you know, working in conjunction with Jonathan, all the great visual effects people, came up with something that is really interesting and a really cool design that also looks incredibly fearsome and deadly.
Well, we're seeing the Cyclops, which I think is going to be one of the highlights of the movie.
It's something that, going back to the original myth where Odysseus goes up against them.
The Cyclops was one of the favorite designs in antiquity. They loved seeing that guy with his with the one eye, instantly recognizable.
From the mythology, there were 3 Cyclopses that helped Hephaestus in his forge and were the forgers of the weapons of the gods.
As they are kind of described in Hesiod's Theogony, yes, these are the ones who are in the volcano putting together these weapons.
Totu Hephaestus.
Our idea was always that they would speak to each other in ancient Greek. And so, yeah, I think the final language that they've arrived at is probably some crazy combination of things that really you can't decipher. But yeah, that was the idea, was that as much as we could sort of root this in the original mythology and give a little nods to, you know, the original mythology, we would.
The monsters themselves have a life of their own. Pretty exciting to us. I think it's great that we play with them and we adapt them for our purposes, because in that way we bring new life into them.